right-wing tactical denialism. Let's discuss. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night to you. Hello and welcome, and namaste. Thank you for listening, thank you for tuning in. I am your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and this is Good Morning Trumptopia, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast, which has been on the air, so to speak, on the internets, at any rate, since January of 2017. Please do join me in a journey backwards through time to review all the various issues we've discussed and pinned on the pin cork board of ideas. Okay, friends, as we've all collectively just witnessed, in the ensuing days, and it's barely been a week and a half or less. I've already lost track of time, but it hasn't been a full 2 weeks. It is yet to hit a complete fortnight since the presidential debate and the Ohio debacle. Now, there's been some good news from Springfield, Ohio, which I'd like to call out and say awesome sauce to. I'd like to shout out to whoever's doing this. But apparently, and I hope this isn't fake news, and I will admit to you that I do not have the resources to go to Ohio and personally verify this, but apparently some of the good folk in Ohio are showing up to Haitian restaurants and making sure that they are nice and busy, given all the hubbub since the debate. Now, the other thing that's been going on since the debate is that right-wing apologists, Trumptopian apologists to be most specific, and by that I mean those who spend their time and energy engaging in public discourse to defend and or rationalize and or dismiss, minimize, or in some way, shape, or form excuse, and that's what we call apologetics, right? Apologize for, make excuses for, and try to distract from the intentionality and or the cause and effect of Trump's Haitian immigrant comment. Now, we all know what's happened. If you've never heard of this and you're new, let me give you the flash update. During the presidential debate, Trump went on a bizarre tirade, making a previously debunked claim that, and I quote, and please don't get it garbled, I'm not trying to perpetuate this incorrect statement, and I'm looking at you, algorithms. Please be advised, I am quoting here and not trying to perpetuate. He made a previously debunked claim, and mind you, the grammar he used. Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs. They are eating cats and dogs. And he repeated it with such outlandish bravado as to create an image of hordes of Haitian, and he didn't need to say illegal immigrants. And we'll put a pin on the corkboard there, because that's a whole little sub-discussion of nuanced projection that is often invoked. But he created this image that Haitians are coming for your cats and dogs, which they are categorically not. Okay, now the whole thing blew up. And people, of course, responded with, hey, the officials of Springfield, Ohio are saying there's no evidence for this. Police in Springfield, Ohio are saying there's no evidence for this. Citizens of Springfield, Ohio are saying there's no evidence for this. And Trumptopian apologists are, here's a bunch of evidence for this. And of course, most of the pieces of evidence that were brought up were subsequently debunked as being used out of context. For example, there were pictures of what appeared to be African males hunting and or gathering and or holding geese. And now those pictures, from what I understand, were debunked because the license plates in the background of the cars of the photo proved that they were from Europe. So they were not happening in Springfield, Ohio. And then, of course, there was the big one. The one that was touted as absolute undebunkable proof. Now, we talked about this in the last episode. Turns out that was not a Haitian immigrant, but an American citizen. And she was being accused of eating a dead cat. She was found with a dead cat. There was no evidence that she ate it. On body cam, she denies eating it. And the case is pending in the court of law. Now, last I checked, according to the court of law, someone charged with the crime is innocent until proven guilty. But of course, Trumptopians don't mind doing that which they refuse to do for Trump, which is to just, go, oh, he must be guilty of that. But I digress. Those are the two separate issues, right? Trump is guilty of the things he's been accused of. And this woman may or may not be. We don't know yet. She may have been there having a mental health issue breakdown and not knowing what she was doing with the cat. The cat may have been roadkill. And she may have been mourning it. Who knows? We don't know. I sure as hell don't. I wasn't there. But from what I did see of the body cam and from what police then spoke out publicly about, there is 0% chance that she was a Haitian immigrant in Springfield, Ohio. Rendering Trump's statement fabricated and false. Now, that's not the topic of this issue. This episode, we already talked about that in the previous one. Let's get to the denialism. It's a long-standing trope, especially in right-wing political ideology. From Nixon's "I am not a crook," all the way to Trump's, and I quote here, Trump said, "I am the least racist person in the room." Now, if you really think about it, that's not a denial, is it? That's just a minimization. Like, grammar experts will tell you, linguistic experts will tell you that statement, it's really flawed as an absolute denial of one's own potential racist bias. But I digress. The chorus of deniers issuing denialism statements are truly astounding because they will, in one post, as I've seen personally, and I'm sure this is not uncommon throughout the entire spectrum of the demographic of people engaging and doing this in social media, but they will speak quite negatively using dehumanizing terminology about immigrants as a whole, but then bend over backwards with denialist tactics to pick apart their own statements and claim there is no racial bias in them. And yet, amongst them all, within this Trumptopian demographic, quite plainly and blatantly and openly are members of the KKK, the entire group, from what I understand, openly and publicly endorses Donald Trump. And while he has made some strange, bizarre, weak, wobbly, and wishy-washy statements that they all claim are hard and resolute, what's the word I'm looking for? I just lost the word. Not rebuff, not rebukes, denials of these things. They kind of wash out against the reality that Trump has repeatedly been seen hanging about, socializing with, either at his own resorts or in other important Republican or right-wing events, with personally self-described, open, publicly, announced white nationalists, ethno-nationalists, Christian nationalists, who are quite painfully, quite biased against anyone who is not an pseudo-Christian nationalist. Now, has racism in America evolved? Absolutely, friends. Absolutely. But has it disappeared? Hell no. And as I had to go into in great detail with someone who was spending a lot of energy both in the threads of discussion under my own posts and in others that we were both participating in, denying that racism is racism. And I quote this gentleman, "You are just seeing racism where racism doesn't exist." Okay? Now let me share with you what I shared with him, which is something I have not brought up too often, but it is something that no one can take away from me. I would swear to you on a stack of Bibles or whatever other documentation you need me to vow to that I'm not making this up. In my entire adult lifetime that I've been fortunate enough to travel the world and go out into the world and enjoy public socializing at bars and bowling alleys and theme parks and all kinds of places where it would be perfectly natural to gravitate towards a stranger and strike up conversation because, we do that in the real world. We open up and have random conversations with people when circumstances provide. One of the strangest and most consistent things that have ever happened to me that I vow to you is 100% real is that in any place I've ever been, at some point or another, someone in my presence has felt comfortable enough knowing that I could see and hear them because they were either speaking directly to me or speaking very openly around me in a very public setting, has felt comfortable enough to crack open the soft, casual, conversational racism of observational commentary about current events, etc. Now, this has taken many forms, from someone saddling up next to me at a bar, "How about them N-words in the sports ball?" and going on to complain and gripe about how they've ruined whatever sport this person's fixated in. That has literally happened to me, not just once, but multiple times in sports bars where I'm minding my own business, having an adult beverage, and enjoying whatever sports are on TV. To nuanced, sophisticated political debate on social media about how what Trump said isn't racist. Okay? And the issue here is that these people adamantly deny their own bias, whilst also engaging in the perpetuation of biased commentary. And if you point that out to them, they will resort to these denialist techniques, these tactics, that invoke all kinds of nonsense, including supposed reverse racism. Now, I will not deny the fact that if one race oppresses and tortures and abuses and enslaves another race for millennia in a country such as ours, that, yeah, you know what? Of course, that's naturally going to produce individuals and collectives in that community that are angry and bitter and hurt and traumatized and have no other way to express that but in terms that can only be described as quote unquote reverse racism. But it's not like that came out of a vacuum. I mean, we can see obvious parallels. And people who are, quote unquote, outraged at the subtle and casual and overt American racism will suddenly, not see this in this following example. But if we change context and go over to, and I know this is a hot, controversial topic right now, which many people want to keep separate, but if we go over to the 70-some-odd-year-long conflict in the Middle East, now, let's be very, very clear. I will never make an absolutist statement about a population of people. because that's the problem. Okay? But when we go to the Middle East, we see an ideological pattern of dehumanizing the targeted, marginalized, and abused minority, and the same sort of, oh, they're the ones being evil reaction when that minority gets fed up and does or says anything in response to the ongoing abuse. But let's set that aside, because way too many people are blinded by their affiliations there and don't, just like the people engaging in denialism about the ongoing problem in America, they will automatically turn to a denialist apologetics tactical, discussion of what's going on over there. Here's the thing. Let's come back to the situation here in Ohio, right? Not only was it debunked, we must, of course, admit the obvious. And I talked about this in the past episode. No one is saying, just like, okay, the problem is absolutist statements, right? When Trump said what he said in the grammatical form that he said it, it was technically incorrect because it was an absolutist monolithic statement, which is easily debunked. Now, they don't want to admit that. They're bending over backwards to dismiss all the evidence that proves that and to find anything that will plausibly, conceptually, can be stretched to be seen as proof that he spoke in absolute truth. Now I already did this in the last episode, but if we can recontextualize it and say something similar about them, they will not only lose their minds, but they will produce sophisticated and nuanced arguments for why that statement is technically untrue. And honestly, it would be. The examples I gave in the last episode and on social media and that I might give here would be untrue if we were to all start using them, right? How many Republican politicians who are publicly and politically adamantly against the LGBTQI community have also been exposed for being members of the same community and in denial about it, closeted about it, and living, in a dualism that's just obvious. But, and I'm not promoting the following sentence, I'm putting it out as a theoretical and saying it would obviously be wrong. Anybody that would try to say that, quote, and again, this is purely theoretical, all Republican politicians are closeted homosexuals, that would be absolutely wrong on the face of it. Okay, but they refuse to see how that works in what Trump said. And they've proceeded to hustle so hard in the ensuing hours, days, and now weeks to bend over backwards to rationalize it away. To say, to even to accuse those of us who are calling it out for what it is, to say, you're just distracting from the real problem and the real racists and I'm sorry, what? There are now flyers being distributed, which I don't think I had the opportunity to talk about in my last episode because I hadn't found it yet. But now, again, I can't go traveling to Ohio. Wish I could. Pin on the corkboard. Somebody out there is an angel investor and wants to make it possible for me to do all these things that I cannot do because I don't have the bankroll and the capabilities to hire people. Let's go. I got a business plan, but I digress. If we were to go to Ohio, I would not be shocked, nor amazed, nor terribly surprised to find that this report is true. According to a pastor in Ohio who photographed a flyer and, distributed it on the internet, it's now making the rounds everywhere, there is an openly identified, like they're proud of it, chapter of the KKK there that is organizing and promoting and, trying to rally all those who are fed up with anyone who is not them. Now, I've already made posts about it, but here's the thing. Where are the apologists Are they standing up to that? Because that's those are the quote unquote real racists that they claim anybody of us who's saying, hey, what Donald Trump did was patently racist, are distracting from. And these quote unquote real racists are regurgitating the talking points that Donald Trump uses. This is not new. This has been happening since the beginning. Just like evangelical Christians have quite irrationally decided to frame Donald Trump as either Christ himself reincarnated, which is flabbergastingly unbelievable, or any other saint or, meaningful persona from their canopy. What's the word? From their cartoon comic book character list of imaginary friends from the Bible. And pin on the corkboard, I'm not anti-Christianity. I'm anti the tyranny of false ideological dogma that uses Christianity and that manipulates Christians. There's a difference, right? And if these Trump apologists were half as sincere as they want to sound, where were they and what were they saying during the Black Lives Matter movement? Where were they during the Civil Rights Movement? Where were their parents, I suppose? Where are they on the Civil Rights Movement now? There's a very publicly, a very public advocate for Trump who has the audacity to label themselves a human rights advocate or fighter, who on every issue has just regurgitated, doubled down, and bent over backwards to defend Trump's very anti-human rights stances and policies at every turn. And it's amazing. And like all the rest of the apologists, this individual is busy attacking those who are standing in unity with targeted minorities. And mind you, immediately following Trump's statements in the debate, there has been a measurable escalation of harassment and literal bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio, targeting Haitians. It's not so nuanced as to only target the illegal immigrant ones, right? It's targeting anybody that looks Haitian to them. These apologists always say, just like Trump does, I'm the least racist person in the party. Or they'll, I'm not racist. But I will fight to defend these policies, which I don't think are racist, but ultimately, overwhelmingly, negatively impact targeted minorities. Whether it's policies or conspiracy theories being espoused and spewed and promoted and propagated by Trump and his acolytes, they will bend over backwards and bury their heads in the sand, or worse, or worse places, to deny that which they claim they would have been standing up to if it were real. And now, obviously, I like to remind everyone of this. Just because you haven't seen a thing doesn't mean it's not out there. And I'll acknowledge this right now. Just because I haven't seen them take open public stances against something that's patently, obviously, clearly racist doesn't mean they haven't. But when I ask them, they like to sidestep like there's salt on the dance floor, baby. That's an old dance reference, which may or may not make sense, which is also got big, deep-rooted history in American racism. But that's a huge pin on the corkboard. We can unpack that later. The sidestepping is astounding. And the collective effort, whether it's conscious or not, and here's the issue, I will give them this much benefit of the doubt. It might very well be unconscious. I don't doubt that a lot of these individuals and this demographic as a collective, that a percentage of them truly do believe that they are not really racist. right? And they truly do believe that Trump couldn't possibly actually be a racist. I mean, he has a diverse following. He can't be racist. There's black people for Trump. Okay, a person can surround themselves with minorities and still say and do and enact policies that are, no matter how subtle, no matter how sublimated, no matter how well whitewashed, ultimately, in their end result, in regards to what happens, what actions are taken by themselves or others inspired by, categorically racist. And this act of surrounding themselves with people that are not exclusively members of the Caucasian race, which is, of course, beyond the corkboard, a completely made-up idea. Let me get to one of the core points, which I haven't had the chance to make recently, that sits at the center of my thinking of all of this. The human species is, fundamentally, genetically speaking, 99.99999999999 ad nauseum, so many nines, % identical to one another. This is why it outrages me. This is why I'm especially outraged at those that will engage in the apologistic nonsense to bend over backwards to deny. And they'll even use some of this kind of idea that we are all one. And I mean, this is the irony of where the United States of America is today, ideologically speaking. Trump himself has done this. But some of the people most caught up in this hypocrisy will literally insist that they believe in that idea, that ideal, that they don't judge people by the color of their skin, but rather by the nature of their character. That would be great if they were doing that. That would be great if their policies didn't end up having a majority negative impact on targeted minorities. That would be great if their actions and their words and the consequential unfolding of events inspired by their actions and their words didn't prove them hypocrites. And the ultimate irony is, when these people get the most outraged is when they are being called out for the quality of their character and the flaws and the obvious hypocrisies of. Listen, I'm not trying to call anyone a racist. I'm just pointing out that it is very much alive and very much real in America. I did not imagine the multitude of incidents that I have personally witnessed in my lived experience of people openly engaging in that casual conversational racism that they then try to deny. I've seen it firsthand all over the place. And the irony, of course, is I've only been witness to it because I pass as. I am projected upon consistently and assumed to be one of them. And I always get the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know what I mean? Sort of, hey, let's not get overboard here, but you know what I mean? I am, the irony being that if those people, and this, I have done this, I have tested this. I haven't done it 100% of the time because there are limits to where, how intensely I'm willing to risk where that reaction is going to go. But I have had conversations with people where I felt comfortable enough after they have tipped their hand and given me the, I'm not a racist, but opening, and then some casual racist in conversation, racism, some casual conversational racism occurs, and then wink, wink, nudge, nudge, let's not. I then turned to them, stared them dead in the eye, and said, I am a Mexican. Now, I've only done this when I've been more than certain that violence would not ensue. So it's usually been with people who I've taken the measure of and gone, okay, I really don't think that they are going to. And I'm in a situation where I don't think they've got like 10 buddies ready to pile up on me, okay? Because I'm not that naive, and I'm not that willing to risk it. But this is my reality, folks. I'm not from this country, and if I looked any different than I did, people would not assume that I was one of them. They would obviously express their prejudice in the ways that they normally would to people who they could visually confirm are, as far as they are concerned, not real Americans. And that's always one of the things that's sitting there in the word cloud of stuff that they say is not racist, right? But it's not racist, but those people over there aren't real Americans. We're not being racist. We're just defending America from these criminals and horrible, horrible, horrible individuals that we are dehumanizing with these labels that we are applying to them. I very recently had someone explain to me, like totally mansplain. What do you call? Is there a mansplaining version for when a racist apologist explains to you something isn't racist and then proceeds to say something really racist? But they were saying, someone was explaining to me quite drolly with God, I mean, I don't know if they are self-aware or not. It's really hard to tell. That whenever those kinds of dehumanizing terms being used, they're only being applied to actual criminals. Okay, so criminals aren't human beings now? I'm not defending any category of criminal, but isn't it adorable how when their beloved idol, who they swear isn't racist, turns out to be a criminal, we can't call him a criminal. We can't call him a felon. Or they're going to turn it around and turn it into a badge of honor, right? Like, real men wear diapers. Wow. What? They don't see it, right? Like, it's so convoluted. It's such a pretzel-making bit of nonsense. And the thing is, it's also that statement, whenever those labels were being used, it was only being accurately used to describe evil, horrible people that don't deserve to be treated as human beings. A, they're human beings. B, what do we call, well, it was always a kind of hypocrisy, but what do we call the jail system in America? There's that word. It's, dang it, now it's not coming to me. Corrections facilities. We're supposed to help fix those people. I don't know how locking a person up in a tiny little box and then, keeping them all with a bunch of other people that do the same thing and not providing them any education and not providing them any kind of rehabilitation is going to correct the issue. But, and never mind the inherent racism of the fact of the, 18th Amendment. But pin on the corkboard. If I haven't already done an episode about that, I think I have. I invite you to go dig it up. Please do just go diving through all my previous episodes and travel backwards in time with me to find the pins on the corkboard, to see the big patterns that are right there and that we need to connect the dots on collectively and have an open, honest, serious discussion, which will take many rounds of participating in public discourse before we can really get past the nonsense to build fact-based consensus. Okay? But I digress. So this guy's statement is duplicitous in and of itself because A, when it is said, it is phrased and framed in absolutist terms to either directly state or in some sublimated, subtle, what's the plausibly deniable way, imply or suggest that all the immigrants are coming are criminals. And since they're criminals, they're such horrible, horrible, horrible pieces of garbage that they don't deserve to be treated like human beings. Now, the third thing that is painfully hypocritical and patently obvious about this malarkey is that the collective on the right, now this obviously is not a monolithic statement, but the collective on the right has a plurality of self-declared Christian identity. I don't know about you guys, but the last time I checked, and mind you, I used to be a card-carrying, proud AF Bible-thumping Christian. But the last time I checked, Christ hung out with the lowlifes and the criminals and the marginalized. And he preached that you treat the foreigner as if he were your own brother. You treat the prostitutes as if they weren't objects. You treat, I guess back then, tax collectors had a really marginalized and attacked sort of, designation. You treat them like they were your fellow human beings. You treat everybody the way you would want to be treated. And the penultimate irony here is the vast majority, and I'm sure there are exceptions, but the vast majority of these xenophobic people are direct descendants of immigrants. And a huge swath of them were, at the time, excluded from the club of ethno-nationalism. A simple review of American history will verify that, racism is not just a black and white thing. The Irish were not white enough or whatever enough. And when they first became, when they were first emigrating legally and illegally, they were targeted in this exact same way. How many of them now are in the Trumptopian demographic, right? You can go through the list. The absurdity of it all is that the ultimate net result is all of their efforts renders, aid, and abets, facilitates the very, very real, patently obvious ethno-nationalist agenda. Project 2025. And it's the caveat, a little fun subreddit. This is not Reddit, but a little sidebar here. It's amazing how many times I've directly asked someone who's dismissing and or defending Project 2025 and or just regurgitating Trump's denialism about it. And I ask them, so have you read it? They're like, no. Why should I? That's just flabbergasting, right? Like you're going to engage in the defending of and or denial of a thing that you haven't even read. Wow. That takes a lot of critical thinking. That takes so much critical thinking, it's mind-numbing. And net result is policies that will be put into place that will negatively impact, in an overwhelming fashion, minorities. And women, right? That's another one of the ways we can recontextualize this whole Ohio thing. I've tried to give many examples, and I'm really sort of I want to be very careful when I do this because I don't want to be flagged and or incorrectly identified as doing the opposite of and promoting horrible things. I'm not, but I'm trying to exemplify the flaws in the apologist denialist argumentation being made. Right? That wasn't racist. Okay, it's to say the statement, quote, insert any nation, especially any third world nation, any brown or majority black-skinned nation, are some horrible thing. And to use the singular label, right, in this term, Haitians or Haitian immigrants, grammatically speaking, That's to target the entire group and to leave no room for nuance. It's an absolutist statement. If we were to recontextualize that and make, like I've already made the examples, but again, I'm just trying to pound home the point. If we were to say the same thing about right-wing Republican men are, insert something horrible, we would A, be categorically wrong, and B, they would be correct in tearing that statement apart. And yet, when we do the same, when we're doing what they would be doing in that situation about what Trump literally said and the way in which he said it, they are doing what they are doing. And there's a point in which I become flabbergasted because none of this is new. This exact same set of what's the right word here? This exact same of tactics, this exact same set of ideological arguments were used, under completely different historical contexts and different specificities going on throughout the entirety of American history. Now, I don't have any direct examples in front of me. I wish I did. But I'm fairly certain, and I apologize if I am technically incorrect, but I'm fairly certain that if we did a thorough search back or was able to go back in time to the time in America when we were really, really, really engaged in the public discourse debate about whether or not racism should continue in America, there were people who were out there making the claim that owning African slaves was not inherently racist. And they were trying to take themselves seriously, and they wanted other people to believe it. And then they would proceed to do all the horrible things that they did to their slaves. And the ultimate thing that makes this egregious is that specific to the Trumptopian party, all of this is caught up in, intertwined with, and woven into a false pseudo-Christian dogma and ideological construct, which is egregiously the most anti-Christian thing, the most un-Christian thing I've ever seen come out of Christianity, out of American Christianity. But of course, this isn't just happening here, it's happening all over the place. That's another pin on the corkboard, which we'll have to come back to. Discussed it before, and we'll discuss it again. Friends, this kind of apologism and denialism must not stand. If it isn't you, don't get triggered. If the shoe fits, you need to take the time to stop and actually apply whatever critical reasoning you really think you have and wonder, why are you doing this? Why are you defending that which must not be defended? And you must ask yourself, when will you actually step up in unity with those who are directly experiencing the racism you say is imaginary or doesn't exist, or that you're not defending, you're not trying to distract from? I don't want anyone to feel attacked by my words. This is about the ideology and the tactics being used. This is an invitation for anyone who finds themselves caught up in it to disengage from that. This is an invitation for anyone who's like, why have I been doing that? To untangle themselves from that web they've been weaving. This is an invitation for anyone who genuinely believes that they aren't racist to go, okay, I'm going to join the chorus of voices who are defending marginalized communities instead of standing somewhere else trying to make that problem disappear. Because it has not worked. It didn't work a generation ago during the original, during the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s and 70s. It didn't work generations before during the abolition movement. Is that the right wrong? That's the wrong word. During the anti-slavery movement. It has never worked. And if anyone finds themselves in this situation, and he's truly, truly honest about not wanting to be racist, then they need to step up and call out the real racists in their party. If you are wearing a Make America Great Again hat, and you don't want to be lumped together with the KKK and the other groups that are patently ethno-nationalists, which is a very different word, but is inherently racist, because ethno-nationalists believe that the only race worthy of having political power are the white Caucasian Christians. That's why it's a Christian nationalist movement, right? But they prefer Christian nationalists, which is still inherently egregious and un-American and wrong. But they kind of leave out the ethno part, but they are inherently saying, even if you are a Christian, you might not be Christian enough. You might not be white enough at some point or another. If anyone is truly, in this day and age, unsure of what to do, it's not that hard, my friend. You stop apologizing for, you stop trying to dismiss and or rationalize that which may be subtle, casual, conversational racism, and you start listening to the voices of those targeted minorities that are experiencing the end result. Because there's a trajectory from subtle, sublimated, casual, biased discussion and or ideological dogma, and the actions of those who are abusing and or attacking and or confronting people they perceive as whatever word salad of garbage labels they use to excuse their behavior towards them. I mean, the reason it is so flagrant is that not only are we genetically identical, there's the philosophical and metaphysical argument that we are also unified in consciousness. But that's a whole nother pin on the corkboard. That's a whole nother level of discussion, friends, which, if you dig deep into my multiple years worth of content, you've seen I've already approached and discussed in depth. Please join me in that. It's all sitting there waiting to dive and swim through and then come back out and be like, oh, look at these pins on the corkboard and how they line up. As always, friends, I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts. And I invite you to, not blindly consume what I share and nod along and just agree. I mean, if you are doing that, okay, I guess. But now let's move forward with the discussion, right? And if you were willing to come to listen, despite being someone who believed that they would disagree, I invite you to dig deep and find out whether or not we are really in disagreement. Because one of the ironies is that, especially within the demographic of those who are trying to minimize and say, well, there's real racism over there and this other thing isn't, is that they will often try to assuage themselves with the notion that they don't see race. They don't see people's skin color. And yet, they will go out of their way to endorse and or defend the dogma and the policies and the ideological ramblings of Donald Trump. And it's time that, well, it's always time to stand up to that. There is never a time when it isn't the time to stand up to that. But right now is the time, the opportunity for anyone and everyone who has been carried along by the Trumptopian movement. And he very much is the leader of a movement, or at least the poster child for. I don't know if he's... I wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt of being the intellectual architect of. I don't think he has it in him, no offense. He just has not displayed the supposed level of mastery that he often claims for himself, neither in business. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. We've had it before, and I'm sure we'll have it again, or in this matter, right? But he is the poster child of this movement, and it is real, and it has its ideological Bible, and I choose that word very carefully. It has its ideological manifesto, Project 2025, which they've tried to rebrand, and they've spent a lot of energy to dissociate themselves from. Pin on the corkboard. We will come back to that subject. But if you're interested on where I generally stand, you can piece it together by going over to my TikTok page and seeing the things I've reposted from other content creators who've already addressed that issue with an eloquence I was not ready for yet. But yeah, it's absurd that he's denying that he's involved with that when he's literally attended meetings where they were talking about it, engaging in promoting it, and he literally said, said his bit about thank you for doing this work for us. But again, it's too much to go into. Friends, right now, we must unify. This is always the case, but once again, this is an opportunity to rally even harder. Okay? And yes, we must make sure that we, the collective of people who are uniting to stand against both the individual, Donald Trump, and I think there's more than one or two movements, all blurred together there, but the collective Trumptopian phenomena. This is my stern look over the glasses at that coalition. We cannot indulge in the same tactics that they do, because it's happening, folks. It's happening, and they're gonna push that in everybody's face. But there are instances of people on the broad, big tent, diverse coalition of individuals and collectives and communities that are banding together to stand against Trump and Trumptopian movements that are getting too worked up and too adamant and too, I choose this word carefully, militant about it. And this is the scary part, folks. That's not an accident. Just like the Trumptopian ideological echo chamber is obviously designed to get away with ginning up and riling up and ratcheting up the anger and the blind rage and the fury amongst those who align themselves with the coalition of ideological constructs that they've either hijacked or cultivated over there under the Trumptopian banner, into doing something, into acting out. That echo chamber is designed to agitate and activate the people who are caught up in it. The same thing's happening on the left, yo. Whatever the left is. The same thing's happening to everyone that is part of the coalition uniting to stand against what Trump and Trumptopianism stands for. And we must be vigilant. And we must lead by example. We must, as a coalition of diverse thinkers who may not agree about a bunch of other things, but are united in taking a stand vocally, publicly, politically, ideologically, and spiritually against the Trumptopian movement and the cacophony of crazy in there, because it is a little on the crazy side, folks. There's a lot of irrationality going on over there. We must exercise the kind of discipline that we are encouraging our brothers and sisters who find themselves carried along by that current and don't want to be, to exercise for themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's a pin on the corkboard. It's something we're going to have to come back to and talk a lot more in depth about. Because despite the completely inaccurate accusations that I am blindly defending the left, because I'm not, despite all that, I have people on the left angry at me for daring to occasionally point this out, that we must also be vigilant on the left. For the exact same reasons that we must be collectively vigilant and demand vigilance in and out of the right. The two wings are attached to the same system of systems. Pin on the corkboard. And that system of systems is riddled with problematic issues and corruption. Multiple pins on the corkboard, which I invite you to dive into my past episodes to engage in the thought process and the public discourse about. And if we're ever going to heal the systems so that the two wings can flap together in unity and actually lift everyone up, we must address that which transcends the ideological echo chambers on either side. Pins on the corkboard. If you're curious, if that engages you, if you want to know more about that, please jump into my existing content. Find the titles that appeal to you, and then dive around to the titles that don't make any sense, and find the pins on the corkboard. Until next time, friends, I've been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. This has been a real, raw, and radically unscripted episode of Good Morning Trumptopia, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast.
Thank you for listening, folks. If you'd like to participate in the social media side of this public discourse project, please find the link for the Facebook page for this and all the various shows part of this podcast over on Facebook. Just go to, just type in the Almost Daily Zencast. Or if you'd like to, please visit solo.to/Mr. Zeppo and find all the places you can listen to the podcast. Although I humbly invite you, if you don't have a preferred podcast player and you're willing to come check out this podcast and its many special segments on its original platform, that would be a huge help to this content creator. Come on over to Sprecher.com and find Mr. Zeppo. The easiest way to do it is to visit my personal collection of link page. It's safe, it's free. You just go through and click on the things you want to look at, and it includes the Sprecher page for the Almost Daily Zencast, and that is solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. Namaste, folks. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.